Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello to anyone who's listening via the Temple Beth Am podcast, whenever it happens to be that you're listening. We are about to do a really interesting verse that has two Rashis on it, one really long. The really long one, it's very nitty-gritty grammar, but I think there's a little bit of a jewel at the end of it. So I think hopefully you'll feel like it is paying off. Not that we're doing this for a particular return, but you know what I mean, that there's some juicy material in addition to the dry grammar. So I think that we read verse 4, but did not yet read verse 5 and the Rashi. Is that correct? Okay. Let me go back and read verse 4 just to remind us what we're doing, and then we'll get to verse 5, which is really the new verse. Vayikra Pharaoh Moshe u'Aaron. Pharaoh called out to Moses and Aaron, Vayomer, and said, Ha'atiru el Adonai, something like plead to God or beseech on my behalf. That's implied to God. V'yaser ha'tzfardaim, and God will remove the frogs, mimeni, from me, u'me'ami, and from my people. Va'ashlacha et ha'am, I will dispatch the nation, v'yizbechu l'Adonai, and they will worship to God. Right? So Pharaoh is done with the frogs, and he's not only wants to get rid of them, he's even willing to push them in the direction of doing the holy thing that Moses said that is the thing they're doing and why they're leaving, to pray to God. Right? There's been no mention on Moshe's behalf yet that we're going to leave and we're not coming back. We're going to leave into the desert, worship God, and that's what we're asking to do. Pharaoh says, okay, I relent. Right? That's the verse that we ended with. Were there any lingering thoughts on that before we go to the next verse? Barry, you need a microphone.
Which chapter? 8.
Yes.
Sorry, chapter 8, we just did verse 4.
So, is this on? Okay. If the magicians had the frogs emerge, why does Pharaoh only ask Moshe and Aaron to remove the frogs? Question 1. Question 2, Pharaoh signifies Adonai, not your God, but Adonai. So it seems to be recognizing not just your God, but Adonai.
Yeah. So in what Pharaoh is communicating to Moses and Aaron, at least our version of that story in the Torah is that Pharaoh is referring to God as the Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. We've been asking the question throughout, what is it indeed that the magicians of Egypt have power to do, and what do they not have power to do? So far, they seem to have power to make the problem worse, right? But they don't seem to have power to remove the problem.
Rabbi, excuse me, Ilan Spar is asking to be let in.
And so he shall be. Hi, Ilan. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Rebecca. Sorry about that. I was so caught up in the verse that I was not looking at the Zoom. Sorry you were hanging out there.
I've just figured it was punishment for the Yankees' performance, and you were going to shut me out for the entirety of the.
It's just I feel like a Tiger fan, and that's really one of the hardest things you could say as a baseball. That's just to put a smile on Larry's face. Tova, take a mic, and then Norm. And folks who just joined, we're still lingering on final thoughts on verse 4, which we did last week before we look at the verse 5, which you didn't hear me say this, has two interesting Rashis, one a very long nitty-gritty grammar one, but there's some good stuff at the end.
Okay, this is riding on Barry's question partly, but with a little difference. Previously, the blood was replicated by the Hartumim. Now they've replicated the frogs. The impression you got the first time was Pharaoh is not as impressed, even if he's distressed, because they've duplicated it. But this time, even though they've duplicated, he seems to be distressed. Is it just the plague is more? And again, the question that Barry asked, then why just ask Moses and not, them from? And the second was apologies for not being here last week. And the answer to the question of how big Ramesses' kingdom was is that it stretched roughly, the dominion stretched roughly from north of Damascus to south of the Elephantine, which is below the Aswan Dam. But they would not have considered the Levant as part of Egypt. It was simply a tributary, and they may have had a few governors there, but it wasn't part of the land of Egypt. It was simply tributary.
That's helpful context. Just to point out in the verse what Tova was mentioning, if you compare the progression from verse 3 and 4 in our chapter to the progression of verse 22 and 23 in the, just verse 22 on its own, you'll note what Tova was pointing out. In our verse 3 says the Chartumim did it too, and by verse 4, Pharaoh's like, I can't live without frogs anymore. I got to call Moses and Aaron and get rid of them. In the blood, verse 22 says, "Vayasuchein Chartumim Mitzrayim belatehem." The Egyptian magicians did the same thing. Vayachazek laf Paro, and Pharaoh said, I'm just as powerful as they, right? So I'm satisfied. But here, maybe Pharaoh's realizing the doubling of the plague is suggesting I'm losing this battle. Yeah, good pickup. Norm.
I just want to comment that Pharaoh's using Yod He Vav He to refer to God does not mean that he is acknowledging him as the one true God of the universe. It's simply a name. It's just like if we were referring to Baal or Ashtoreth, it doesn't mean that we acknowledge them as gods. That's just the name of some concept.
So I can't hear two at once. Go ahead, Norm.
That's it.
But I didn't hear it because I was, do that last sentence again. It's okay.
Okay. It's just as if we were referring to Baal or Ashtoreth. It does not mean that we recognize them as having any particular divine attributes. But if they, if a bunch of Baalites show up and say they want to go out someplace in the wilderness and pray for 3 days, I assume we would let them.
And we might just refer to their name for their God in the third person without our acknowledging the divinity of said God.
Yeah.
Just as you did in that sentence, like you're a God-fearing Jew, I know you to be, and yet you said the word Baal. Doesn't mean that you believe in Baal, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay. Barry, let's give Barry the microphone.
Just a rejoinder to that. At the end of 6, Pharaoh's telling them that there is none like Adonai. I'm sorry. Chapter 6? No, I take it back.
We'll get there in a second. That's in Moses' voice, not Pharaoh's. Let's go to verse 5. Verse 4. No, verse 5, sorry. Rick, do you want to read verse 5 for us?
Sure.
You take one that mic? Is it supposed to pick you up from there? Let's try that. Talk regular and see if they can hear you. So talk regular.
Hi. Can you hear me?
They can hear you? Oh, perfect.
Great.
Wonderful. Great.
Yes. He said it's a new mic. Verse 5. Vayomer Moshe leFaro, Hipa'er alai, Lematai atir lecha, V'la'avadecha u'la'amacha, Lehachrit chatzfardim, Mimecha u'mibatecha, Rak ba'yor tisha'arna.
Good. And as you go towards the translating, there are several different ways to parse this sentence syntactically. I remember in grammar school, we used to have to do those sentence equations where you had to, what they were called. Diagramming sentences. We'll look at some translations after we cut through it, but there's several different ways of putting soft commas in terms of figuring out what the tone is. But let's get the words first.
Can I do it by the trope?
Yeah, that's okay.
So Vayomer is the introduction, and then Moshe leFaro goes together. But Moses is talking to Pharaoh. Moses says to Pharaoh, Hipa'er alai goes together. Lematai is a little bit.
What does it mean? Or what could it mean?
The English is glory over me, but I don't like that at all. I'm sure you've got a better translation.
So the root of
the Silverman says glory.
The root of Hitpa'er is pe aleph resh, which means something exalted or glorified or lifted up. Right? Tiferet is the word built from that. It's one of the sfirot of Kabbalah. It also just means some kind of like a crowning glory. And this is in the Hitpa'el, right? And it's in the what do you give when you're giving someone a direction? What's the word? What's the form? Yeah, but what's it called?
Hipael is reflexive. So what you mean?
No, but it's
Imperative.
imperative. Thank you.
Imperative.
Imperative reflexive, right?
Really?
Which is it's as if Pharaoh is speaking to Moses is speaking to Pharaoh, saying, "You shall or you must." Like glorify yourself, it's something like that. And we have to figure out what that means in the context of the verse. But that's what the verse means. It means so it's like glorify yourself as an exclamation point. And the question is it a taunt or a description? Keep going.
Moses to Pharaoh, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Lematai, matai is when. Lematai is to when.
Or maybe regarding when, right? The lamed can also just be a regarding with respect to.
Yeah, and it's separated from the rest of the phrase by the pasek there, a musical pause. Atir lecha. So the atir is like hatiru from the sentence before, and Rashi is all over it.
Right.
So we'll get to that. Okay, then vilavadecho.
But what does it mean? What does it mean plainly? So something will glorify yourself over me, whatever that means. Regarding
atir,
when.
So atir is the command. Entreat lecha to you.
Right. See how it's hard to make sense of this? It's something like regarding when or when I will plead licha. It's not to you because it's for you, right? Your behalf. So there are lots of pluripotent prepositions here that could mean several different things. Go ahead. Yeah. And not only to you or for you, but
your servants and your people. Okay, so again, this is Moses to Pharaoh. Okay, so your servants and your people. Lahachrit, karait is to killed. Cut. Thank you, karat. Yeah, lahachrit. To cut off whatever the frogs,
right? So
from
here,
you,
right? So it means something like it's the he feel of cut. So it means to make cut off, really to end the phenomenon of, right? To eliminate the frogs from upon you.
Umibatecha, and from your houses, rock by or only by the river
or in the river,
Tisha Arna, they shall remain.
Good. Okay.
Question.
We will spend a while on translating this verse, but can someone tell me in their own words what you think is being conveyed by the Torah here? What is it that Moses is saying to Pharaoh, and what's the punctuation? What's the tone of voice? Barry?
You think you're going to glorify yourself while I remove that God's going to take this away? You're glorifying yourself? What a boast.
So is the boast referring to that? Oh, someone's trying to get in. You think, is the boast referring to that which has already happened or that which is about to happen? Okay. Tova, and then I see Barbara's hand.
Probably don't understand the Hebrew sufficiently, but it's to err a lie. Could it be you're attributing this glory to me or this power to me? I mean, could it be in that direction, in a kind of sarcastic way, like now you're attributing this power to me? Well, just for what period of time should I mean, there's still this kind of sarcastic tone, but I'm wondering if that's what the implication is.
As if you're the heat pa'er, the form of it, if the normal forms hold in this verse 2,
Right.
that the lording over is not attributed to Moshe, but attributed to Pharaoh, right?
So you're doing this over me.
Something like that. But the question is, what's the force of that? Barbara and then Stevie?
Safaria translates that word as being triumph. You may have this triumph over me. And then it goes on to say, for what time shall I plead in behalf of you and your courtiers and your people?
Right. So Safari, it depends on which translation you're reading, because Safari has about 8 translations. So we're going to look at Safari in a second, right? So we have a lot of synonyms for Lord over me, exalt yourself over me, triumph over me. We still haven't unlocked exactly what's happened. Like what is the message that Pharaoh's supposed to be hearing from Moshe? Stevie and then Norm?
Yeah, it's something to the effect of you have set up a hierarchy where you're above me, and now, just for this moment when you're begging for my help.
Mhm.
But
Say it again.
that, right, you're elevated, right, over me. And
Moses talking to Pharaoh.
right. Moses talking to Pharaoh, and you're asking me for help.
As a description, or as a taunt, or as a challenge? How are you reading it?
I don't know I don't know exactly what the distinction is there, but more or less as a taunt, I guess.
And so flesh it out one more time. So the content of the taunt is that you think you're better than me? Is that what it is?
Or you've
You've placed yourself over me, and yet now you're asking for my help.
So does that okay? So what Joel said, you didn't hear on Zoom, is you inflate yourself over me, but yet you're begging for my help. Okay, now I understand that way of reading it. Norm, Larry, Diane, Sue, and then we'll actually look at some translations. And Larry, Diane, watch out. There's someone behind you. Just make sure he's safe.
I think there's an alternate.
He's opening drawers and taking pots and pans. Just be careful.
I think there's an alternate possibility that it could just be expressing how wonderful it is that you have made at least an oral promise that you're going to let us go, which I think is an achievement. And then he says, give me the particulars. Don't just give me a general request. Let's have the details.
The tone being less taunty, but almost soft praising Pharaoh that you are you're glorified in my eyes because you're willing to relent, and now what time should I let them go? That would be more compelling to me if the form were like a past tense as opposed to a command. It's hard to read that into Moses like challenging Pharaoh to glorify himself. Sue and then Larry Dan, or I forgot what the order was.
Until I read the Safaria translation, it's the Matai part that the Matai Tzidika that I couldn't get the tone of, but Safaria kind of lays it out like, you think you're so much of something, so what time you want it all to stop, and I think it's the taunt is that I'm Moshe, I'm in charge, not you.
Right. So that last sentence I think is absolutely correct. How does that come out in the words, though? If the feeling we're supposed to get from this verse is Moshe communicating to Pharaoh, you think you're powerful, but you're not. How do we find that in the words? While you're thinking, Larry Dan, and then Tova.
Responding to that, maybe it's as you clarified that he's saying, you've placed yourself or claimed this splendor and position over me, and then and so now you're realizing you don't have that power. So sarcastically, so for how long do you want me to do this? In other words, don't you realize this isn't just now, this is the permanent state of affairs. And you're not recognizing that you want this little help from me now, and you're not really acknowledging the real state of affairs.
Okay, getting close. Good, Larry, Diane. No, I mean like we're creating a circle with lots of small little straight lines, right? Because we're getting close to a full understanding of the verse. Larry, Diane.
So that was my wonderful brother-in-law Gary behind me, and my sister Sherry.
Larry, hold on one second. Alan, can you go to the computer on the thing and just make the volume on that computer louder? Because that's how we're hearing it. It's hard to hear Larry. Do you see what the volume is? Or Stevie?
On the top on the screen, too. On the screen. I mean, I'm sorry, on the keyboard. On the keyboard.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, there should be.
On the number line.
On the number, yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry, folks. This should only take 11 minutes.
It's only at 100.
It's at 100?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we'll close the windows. These darn Jewish kids are having a good time in our darn field while we're trying to study Torah. Okay, Larry, speak a little bit louder.
All right, can you hear me now? Betterish.
Better, yeah.
All right. I have a lot of things to say. I'll try to only say a couple of them. I want to go back to Barry's comment about, and your response about whether the Pharaoh was acknowledging the existence of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, of Adonai. And clearly he was, because, and we know this from this sentence as well, this verse as well, because he asks Moses to plead with God in order to stop the frogs. You wouldn't ask someone to plead to do something if you weren't actually acknowledging the existence of that entity. And in fact, that's what Moses is talking about right here. And you'll ask for translations later, but Alter uses the word vaunt, where Moses says, sorry, where's my phone? I found Alter online, where Alter says, you have vaunted, you may vaunt over me. Well, what are you vaunting over me? And the vaunting is the time at which I will ask God, but not the time at which the frogs will be removed from you. So I don't know if I'm being clear, but there's a huge distinction between saying, go tomorrow to ask God to do this. Clearly, you're asking God to do that, and that's the meaning, I think, of this word vaunt, or however it's
glorify or raise yourself up. Yeah. You don't have you don't have Kaplan with you, do you?
No, I don't. I don't.
Let's look at some of the translations on Sefaria, and I think everything that we've heard the last 7 or 8 minutes are fascinating possibilities. None, I think, is exactly a hit on the target, at least in terms of my understanding of Pshat. That doesn't mean that my understanding of Pshat is correct. But let's see some of the translations, and then I'll share with you what I think the basic Pshat is from my perspective. Okay, so everyone should see the screen. This is Everett Fox. Moses said to Pharaoh, be praised over me. It's a little awkward, right? There's a note here. Others read it as, have the advantage over me. The sense that Pharaoh will be allowed to choose the precise time of the frog's removal, right? As if it's like, it's like I don't know, like dangling in front of Pharaoh a singular moment of thinking that he's in charge, but ultimately to show him that he's not, right? So go ahead, Pharaoh, have a little power. In what way will you have power? For when shall I plead for you, for your servants, for your people, to cut off the frogs from you and from your houses? Meaning, I'm going to give you a moment where you're in charge of me. You tell me when you want them to be removed, right? So in the moment, if we read it this way, Pharaoh has a sense of mitpa'er because he's realizing that he can control the servant who's going to ask God when it's going to be removed. But what's the trick in that? In what way is that only an illusion of power rather than actual power? Because if you, Pharaoh, tell me that you want the frogs removed tomorrow at 3 p.m., and they are, it shows that we're in charge, not you, right? So I think the thrust of the verse, at least the way Everett Fox, and I think Rashi reading the same way, is I'm going to give you the gift of momentary illusory self-importance. And when you're going to execute on that, you're going to give me a challenge. And when I fulfill that challenge, I'm going to really show you you're not in charge whatsoever. Right? That's Everett Fox. Let me just look at a couple other translations.
That seems to be very much informed by the next verse.
Well, I mean, yeah. Let's say that again, for Stevie.
Just that reading is very much informed by the following verse.
Right. And the way I understood your previous sentence is enhanced by your second sentence. Right? Like, so of course, it's going to be translated in a way that sort of makes sense in the context of the following verses. If you just look at it quickly, we'll look at it slowly later, right? No,
but it means that the following verse doesn't have any twist. That's the natural conclusion of this verse, which is not necessarily the only way to read the next verse. It could be that there's something surprising happening.
Got it. Okay. Now we're looking at JPS. Moses said to Pharaoh, "You may have this triumph over me," right? Similar. "For what time shall I plead in behalf of you," I would say on behalf of you, "and your courtiers and your people, that the frogs be cut off from your houses to remain only in the Nile?" Which the way JPS is translating it, it almost sounds like not a taunt, but I'm throwing you a bone, right? I'm going to give you this little triumph, right? Look at, let's see, Corin. Moshe said to Pharaoh, "Challenge me to fix a time when I should entreat for thee and for thy servants, for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only." I like this translation because I think it is a challenge, right? You give me a challenge that you think might be impossible. Like you put one card in this deck, upside down, and you choose what it is. And when I tell you it's the 9 of hearts, it's going to be more impressive for me, not more impressive for you. Okay. Let's look at the guy that we met recently that has interesting translations. Where is he? This guy, Kahani. Let's see what he does. "And Moses said to Pharaoh, lest you should boast over me, that the frogs were removed by chance only." This is going to be more like a, less of a direct translation, more of a what's the phrase? I'm losing my English today. Paraphrase. "Therefore, appoint a time when I should intercede for you and for your officials, that the frogs be removed from you and your houses and remain in the river only." And he says here, it based on the Malbim, which was a 19th century Ukrainian sage. So all of these translations are similar to one another, but they're not exactly the same. And they're trying to make sense of the oddness of this phrase, hitpa'er alai, which again is in the command form. Basically, Moses telling Pharaoh, "I'm allowing you, I'm asking you, I'm pushing you to have a moment where you have pe'er, but ultimately it's going to show that you have no pe'er, no glory compared to the God that I represent." Okay, anything else on the verse itself when we look at the Rashis, and then we'll understand how Rashi reads the verse, which is not in line with every reading we have on the table. Sue?
Well, I think there might be just another layer here, and that we're only on the second plague. And, I wonder if Moses is trying to give Pharaoh an out to maintain his at least his standing among his people. After all, Moses is just trying to free his people. He's not trying to, it seems that his goal is not to, completely make Pharaoh look like a fool in the eyes of Pharaoh's people. He just wants the Israelites to go. And so, maybe it's a way to say, I can leave it. It'll look like you're still in charge.
Interesting. So not taunting at all, but almost trying to
help him out.
Try to help me out. You give me the time, I'll make it happen, and you can tell everyone that you told me to tell God that they're going to be. Hey, folks, frogs will be gone at 2 p.m. Mark my word. I told that God, and that God's going to do what I asked him to do.
Yeah,
and I'm giving you.
You don't even have to mention that, God. Just let my people know.
Right, and I, Moses, am giving that to you, Pharaoh. Barry?
Susan, that's a really good, I want to pick up on that. The last thing Moshe wants is to cause a civil riot, a downfall of the Pharaonic government. So he's not going to cause all the people of Egypt to rise up against Pharaoh because he's lost his power. So it's important that Pharaoh maintain his position.
Okay, let's look at Rashi on hitpa'er alai. And first, Rashi is going to break down the phrase itself, what the word means. And then in the next comment, he's going to try to construct the sentence fully. So, Rick, you were reading hitpa'er alai.
Oh, sorry. The Rashi. Kmo hayitpa'er hagarzen. Is that a gimel?
Mm-hmm.
Al hachotzev bo.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen so everyone can look at the verse in context. Okay, chapter was it chapter 15 of Isaiah? Chapter 10 of Isaiah, verse 15. Okay.
So Kmo is similar to like Isaiah.
Right. So look at the verse on the screen, right? So this is what Isaiah is saying. Hayit pa'er hagarzein al chotzev. The ha it creates an interrogative in biblical Hebrew, in poetic modern Hebrew too, but it's read as an interrogative. So it's a question mark, but it appears in the beginning of the phrase. Could it be that the garzain, the axe, boasts over the chotzev, the hewer? Like who's in charge? The one wielding the axe is in charge, not the axe. And so he's asking rhetorically, could the axe ever say, I'm controlling the person who's holding me? No. Im yitgadel hamashur al menifo. Could the saw feel boastful about the one who is waving the saw? And then other examples like that. So Rashi is using this as a way of understanding the meaning of the word, but not the way it's being used, because the meaning of the word is to lord yourself over. In Isaiah, it's rhetorical. Could it possibly be that you would wield yourself over the one who's holding you? In our verse, there is no interrogative. There's an implied taunt, but it's hit pa'er alai, meaning I'm giving you permission temporarily, Pharaoh, to hold yourself over me in the way that an axe could never do over the hewer, right? So it's not, I don't think Rashi is bringing over the interrogative from Isaiah, just the meaning of the word hit pa'er, okay? Keep going. And then Rashi translates what he thinks it means in that verse.
Mishtabeach lomar ani gadol mincha.
Okay, so what does mishtabeach mean?
Sounds like lehishtabeach.
Yeah. Yishtabach shemcha la'ad malkeinu. To be glorified, to be praised, right? So mishtabeach, to praise oneself by saying, Ani gadol mimcha, I'm bigger than you. So in Isaiah, it's saying it could never be that the axe could be mishtabeach over the one holding it. But in our verse, Rashi is saying that Pharaoh is saying to Moses is saying to Pharaoh, go ahead, consider yourself bigger than me. And then the axe is going to fall in the next phrase. And now we have our third Loazé Rashi in a short period of time. Read that again.
So the Old French, vante.
Vante. Okay. So right. So look at the screen. This is entry number 3077 in Otsar Loazé Rashi. The verb is vante. And according to this, and you can tell us, Rosemary, if you know a verb that is similar to that, it means lehit pa'er, to glorify yourself, or lehishtabeach. And then he writes here, ha'havdel ben vante le porvante, the difference between whatever the verb vantel means and porvanter, who, kefi hanireh, shaharishon matzbia al hatif arut, bli siba svira. That the first one, meaning vanter, points to the notion of self-glory without reason. It's like to boast without reason. The hasheni, hitpa'arut, and the second one, porvanter, is to feel good about yourself. Sheyesh la'amal lismoch, that there's a reason why you're doing it. Is that a common?
The word. And vante is like sometimes to lie, but to glorify yourself, to make yourself bigger.
To make yourself bigger.
But we are using it.
Rabbi, you only
I wonder,
need.
Larry, if it's connected to vaunt. I have no idea. I don't know what the origin,
No, it has to be vaunt. It's
What's
exactly vaunt. That's why Alter uses the term vaunt. He's obviously influenced by Rashi.
Yeah, good. Okay, is that what you were going to say before, Larry? I saw your hand up before.
No, but I wanted to read. I've got Alter and I've got Kaplan.
You found him online?
Yeah.
You want to share the screen so we can look at it together?
Oh, I don't have it on the computer. I have it on my phone.
Okay, so go ahead, read them.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so first, Alter, who I already read a little bit, and Moses said to Pharaoh, "You may vaunt over me, as for when I should entreat for you and for your servants and for your people to cut off the frogs from you and from your houses. Only in the Nile will they remain." But now I'm going to read Kaplan, which I won't jump ahead, but I think you're going to understand his translation is fantastic and really remarkable. Try and test me, replied Moses, exactly when I shall pray for you, your officials and your people. The frogs will immediately depart from you and from your homes, remaining only in the Nile. And if I can just say one thing, he's clearly implying that Moses doesn't have to ask God, that in fact, Moses can make them disappear immediately if he wants to.
Yeah, I think Kaplan basically nails it, right? It's not a word for word translation, but he gets the sense of it. And
I missed it. Was he try and test me?
Try and test me, right? Just hold yourself over me, but in the vein of, just try to hold yourself over me, right? Because I'm the one who's going to be able to respond to the very specific request, which means it's gonna be my magic trick, not yours. Okay. Let's give Rosemary the microphone.
The word want means wind.
Wind?
And when you want, you are winding, blowing. That's the word blowing I was looking
Blow hard.
Blowing. Blow hard.
Hot air.
But that's because of V-A-N-T or V-A-U-N-T.
V-A-U.
I think it's like vaunted courage, reputed or supposed.
I just looked it up and said vaunt, V-A-U-N-T is,
Yeah.
Let's keep going, because I also know that the people on the Zoom can't hear the side conversations. Okay, keep going, Rick. V'chein
hitpa'er alai, ishtabeach lahitchakem, v'lish'ol davar gadol, v'lamar shelo ucha la'asoto.
Okay, and this is the part of Rashi which explains the translations that read this as a challenge, okay? Or that inform those translations.
So therefore, hipa'er alai means, hishtabech lehitchanem is pride. Well, the Silverman is means pride yourself on showing your cleverness, davar gadol. On this difficult matter, this big matter.
Well, the lish'ol davar gadol.
To ask this big thing.
Right. So hishtabeach, hold yourself high, Pharaoh. Lehit chakem, and show yourself to be so smart, so clever. And in what way? Lish'ol davar gadol, in asking an enormously hard thing. Velomar, and then say,
that I can't do it, that I shall be unable to do it.
Right. So the way Rashi spells it out is hitpa'er alai. I'm giving you a window, but it's a trap. Go ask me an impossibly hard thing, like the exact moment where the frog should remove, a thing that you're going to imagine that once you ask me, I will not be able to deliver, and you will have gotten me, you will have trapped me. But what we all know is that exactly what Pharaoh is going to ask Moshe to do, he will be able to deliver, no matter how hard the thing is. But in the meantime, Pharaoh, you're going to have this moment of mishtabech, a feeling good about yourself, mitchakem, a feeling that very clever. All of that is going to pendulum shift back to me and to God. Barry?
Just a comment. We should not misconstrue that Moshe is saying that Moshe has the power to do this. Moshe is in the utmost of humility at this point. He has barely begun his process, but with God. I think he's saying that in his position of being with God, this will happen. Not that Moshe is doing it.
Yeah, in the verse itself, it's unclear. I think the way that Larry read Aryeh Kaplan before suggested that it's possible to read Moshe as saying, you, Pharaoh, think you have the power, it is I have the power. In greater context, it's you, Pharaoh, think you have the power, it's really God who has the power, and I'm the one representing God. Larry, Dan, hand up again or still?
Very brief. Could this have anything to do with your Devar Torah 2 weeks ago about certain sock the people who ask?
You meaning was I consciously aware of this while I was writing that, or are you asking if is there a content connection?
I think that there's a connection, especially in the wonderful, wonderful verb lahitchakem.
Yeah.
To make yourself seem wise.
Yeah. Right. To ask a question that seems like you're looking for information, but what's actually happening is that you're trying to catch the other one, right?
Right.
Trying to trap the other one. Yeah, I think that happens all the time, right? It's questions that are not really questions. Okay, so that's Rashi in the first part of the verse, okay, on just the word hitpa'er alai. And now we get to the other challenging syntactical phrase, lit matai atir lacha, which Rashi is going to show us is different than matai atir lacha. And what am I hearing? Okay, Rick, we'll let you off the hook because you've had the microphone for a bit. Joanna, do you want to read the second Rashi, Lamatir Atir Lacha?
Sure. Lamatai Atir Lacha, et asher Atir Lacha hayom al hachratat hatzvardeim, lamatai tirtze sheyikartu.
Okay, translate that first.
Okay, so when or until when, for what period shall I pray for you? I could pray for you today regarding destroying the frogs. But when do you wish for this to happen? When do you wish for the frogs to be destroyed?
Right. And I think the Hayom is operating here. There's something that Rashi is not saying, but he's saying. The part that he's not saying is, this phrase does not mean, Pharaoh, when would you like me to go to God to make this request? It doesn't mean that. It had been just Matai, it would have been. It's when I go to God today, right after I'm going to go to God right after this. I'm going to make you're going to make me a request. I'm going to go to God today. And when I'm standing before God in minutes, when would you like me to ask him to remove the frogs? That the matai is referring to the removal of the frogs, not the moment of the petition, right? And asher atir lecha hayom, the thing that I'm going to ask God today, al hachratat hatzvardeim, meaning the removal of the frogs, lematai tirtzeh, when do you want sheyikartu, that they're going to be removed? That's the timing that we're nailing down. V'tireh.
V'tireh im ashlim devari lamoed shetikbali, and you will see whether or not I will fulfill my word at the appointed time that is fixed for me.
Good. Okay, so that will be how your moment of power in giving me a time of day will turn to God's moment of power, because it's actually going to be fulfilled. Keep going.
Okay. Ilu ne'emar matai atir hayam mashma matai et palel.
Okay, what is that? So we'll do that phrase. Ilu
okay.
Matai atir.
So if the text had said matai atir
rather than matai, yeah,
right, then the question would be like at what time? When should I pray?
Right. Matai atir would mean, when do you want me to go to God and make this request? Le matai atir, according to Rashi, is I'm going to make the request right away. When do you want it to be fulfilled? Okay. Akshav.
Okay, so Akshav shene'amar lematai mashma ani hayom et palel alecha sheyikartu hatzvardeim lizman shetikba alai. Amor le'eze yom tirtzeh sheyikartu. So basically, what you just
go back to that phrase from Akshav.
Okay, so now that it says lematai and not just matai, it means I'm going today, like right now, to pray for the frogs to be destroyed. And the question is, but when will they actually be destroyed at the time that is fixed?
Right, and to translate
When and more yom tirtashi yakartu, and when you want them to be destroyed, right? I'm going to go now, and ask for when you want them to be destroyed.
Correct, and just to sub-punctuate that verses of Rashi, mashma, what it means is ani hayom et palalecha. I'm going to pray on your behalf today. Sheyikartu atzvardiim lizman shetikvali, and I'm going to pray that the frogs be removed at the time that you appoint. And more. So tell me, Pharaoh, le'eza yom tirtzeshi karetu. When do you want them to be removed? I'm giving you this opening. Okay, so that's Rashi's. Rashi has finished his work on explaining to the relationship between hitpa'er and lamatai. He's now going to go into an even narrower grammatical hole to describe just the verb atir. Before we go, are there any other comments or reactions to how Rashi is reading this verse? Okay, so now that Rashi feels like he's explained what the verse means, he wants to go deeper into this verb atir, which we discussed last time is first used in the book of Breshit to describe the pleading for fertility, right? Vayetar Yitzchak el Adonai lenochach ishto, right? That Isaac prayed to God or appealed to God regarding his wife that she become pregnant. So that's what it's a pleading that something happened, but there's something about the form of it that's interesting that Rashi wants to explain. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so atir, hetiru, vehetarti.
Which are all
Velo nemar etar itru.
And all of those appear. So atir is in our verse. Tiru is in verse 4. Right, that's the first one. And then we have etarti is going to be ahead in verse 25. So these are three different forms of the verb atir. Velo nemar etar itru ve'atarti. Mipnei she'kol lashon atar harbot pelelhu. Okay, so let's break that down.
Asher yomar arbe harbu.
But 1 second, Adriana, let's break that down. So Rashi says
he's pointing out. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know that I understand it fully, but he that all of the forms that appear in the Torah are harbot pelalhu. I'm not exactly sure I follow what he's saying there.
Okay, let me. It's very thick. So let me try to break it down. He mentions 3 uses of this root in our chapter, and each of them in modern Hebrew we would call them verbs in the he feel, causative. Okay, Rashi did not know the word he feel. It's just not the word he used, but he knows the form. He does not know the word for it. Right? He says velo namar, and none of these were in the simpler forms. Pa'al or PL, right? So instead of saying atir, it could have said etar. It's like, I'm trying to think of a phrase, like instead of saying echtov, I will write, it was written achtiv, I will make someone else write, I will dictate. But they seem not to be causative situations, right? It's actually Moses talking about praying, pleading himself, but it's in the form that looks like a causation, right? It looks like making someone else do the thing for you. The way Rashi says that in Rashi's Hebrew is that every use of the root ayin taf resh harbot pelel, who refers to the multiplication of pelel. Pelel is prayers, lehit palel, right? It's almost as if he's saying, and I can't tell. I've read this Rashi many times, how wide and far-reaching a sermon he's giving here. Like, I wonder if what I want him to be saying is there's no such thing as a single prayer, and that prayers multiply in God's heavens. And it's never just a one-on-one. Like, if I'm pleading to you or I'm pleading to God, it's not the same form of a verb as one person doing something simple to someone else. There's always an imagined or hoped for multiplication. He might not be going that rhapsodic. He might be staying more in the grammar and saying, the way this verb operates is that even though it's just one person pleading to someone else, it denotes a multiplicity, a harbot pelel. And Rashi is going to say is that even though you and I think, and I was getting chunky, of he feel as causative, I cause you to do something. Rashi is saying it could also mean a multiplicity, like an increase in the number of things that are happening. Just finish off a little bit farther. So harbot pelel who? Joanna, v'chasher.
V'chasher yomar arbe harbu v'hirbeti lashon maf'il. Kach yomar atir hatiru v'hatarti dvarim.
Okay, so break down
he's
that.
now making a comparison to another shoresh. He's making a comparison to another shoresh and giving the examples of the form arbe harbu v'hirbeti, which I guess is somewhat similar because this shoresh too infers an increasing or a multiplying out of whatever we're talking about.
Right. The use of the root harbu arbe hirbeti, it's like the notion of multiplicity doubled because the verb means to increase, and he's saying that verb always appears in the he feel, even when you could make the case that it should appear in the pa'al. I'll try to do this in English. I increased something. In English, the word increase there is a simple transitive verb. You should be able to say that in Hebrew using the pa'al form. Ani ribeiti mashihu. But you don't say that. You say ani hirbeiti mashihu, which looks like it's in the he feel, causative, even though I'm not causing anything.
It is to cause to make more.
No, but I'm the one causing. It's not. It's different than saying I'm causing you to increase something. Right? So there's no way for it not to be in the he feel the way it's used, even though I should be able to say, I increase this. Not the causative should be, I made you increase this. That's what causative means.
The
right?
Rav is more. Laharbot is to make more.
Yeah, but if it were any other verb, it would, to say it in laharbot means I am making someone else make something more. That's the way causative usually operates.
No.
Then what would be
is to make wet. You take the.
But you also have. But then what would the pa'al of make more be? I'm sorry, as Joel is talking back with me, and I'm afraid I don't have a microphone.
The pa'al.
Yeah.
To become large.
To become large.
To become more. Yeah.
Okay, so. In that way, yes, you can make the comparison between wet and to increase, where ani ratev is I am wet, ani martiv, I'm making something else wet, ani rab, I am many, ani marbe, I'm making something else many. But if you take the verb in its plainest form as to mean to increase something, you should be able to write that in a pa'al and not have to resort to a he feel. And Rashi is saying that verb arbe is always in that form, and so is the verb etar, that it always means to plead in the sense that to have prayers be multiplied out, and it's not just a single action. Okay?
When Yaakov used it, was it he feel?
The form was he feel.
It was.
Right? The form is he feel. And we read that when you read that verse in Genesis, we don't have an image of a causation. We have him pleading to God. Rashi would say there's something about what that word means that says that it's if say Yaakov.
It's also the narrator speaking there, not Yaakov speaking.
Yeah. Yaakov entreated God in such a way that the prayers increased throughout the heavens. Something like that. Right? Barry, microphone.
So to put this back into context, what Moshe is declaring to Pharaoh is that Moshe has given Pharaoh the opportunity to increase Moshe's prayer, to expand Moshe's prayer to God to make this happen. Pharaoh's going to participate in what Moshe is going to do, allowing him to do this. It's allowing Pharaoh to cause Moshe to increase the power of his prayer.
Mm-hmm. And if you see the word that Rashi used there, we would say he used the word mafil as the name of the form of the verb, which means causation. Okay? Larry, Diane, and then we'll finish off the Rashi. Oh, we're already at 9:30, geez. Larry, Diane.
Yeah, this is a meta observation. I'm actually amazed. I'm in awe at this discussion. I'm a fan of John McWhorter, the linguist, who talks a lot about how languages change and how quickly they change. And anybody who reads Shakespeare from 500 years ago or Beowulf from before that or anything that's in Old English and really can't understand what's going on. And here we are in the 21st decade, 21st century, going back a millennia to Rashi, and we understand what he's talking about in terms of the structure of Hebrew. And he's going back a millennia to when this was actually codified and we know it was written down. And it's going back another millennia to when this story originated.
Yeah.
And we can have this discussion, which I really don't understand how it's affecting this story, but we can have this discussion and kind of follow Rashi is an amazing, amazing thing that says something about the Hebrew language. And I don't know if there's any other language that's true of it. May be. That's absolutely not true of any other living language that we know of. Right. It's just, right. I'm in awe.
It may be that scholars of ancient Greek can read, Plato in the original, but I'm not sure they would be able to understand the vernacular Greek used 1,000 years after Plato to describe the grammar of Plato, right? But that we're understanding a grammar lesson of 1,000 years ago regarding a text that was, you're right, that was drashed out 1,000 years before that and that emerged 1,000 years before that. It is incredible. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Just to finish it off, Joanna, he gives us one more verse which he considers to be like the classic, obvious, determinative example of how this verb is used, even though it's not, he goes to Tanakh, not to Torah. Go ahead. Ba'av lechulam.
Ve'av lechulam, ve'hatartem alai divrechem, Yechezkel lamed hey.
Okay.
Pir beitem.
Second. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 13. Even how it's translated here is helpful to our cause. Vatagdilu alai befichem. We would normally think lahagdil is to aggrandize and make bigger, but here it's translated as you spoke arrogantly against me because you made yourself big in your own mouths. Ve'hatartem alai divrechem. It's translated here as, and you multiplied your word, meaning the translator of this verse in Ezekiel does not translate it as an entreaty or a plead, but a multiplicity of words. Maybe this is why davening is so long, because we understand that to plea requires a multiplicity of words, right?
Chess was against it.
Yeah, but it's true. He's against it because it's not followed by acts of loving kindness, right? So Rashi, for some reason, thinks that this is the example par excellence where the verb hatartem is in what we would call the he, feel, the causative. It's not causing anything to happen, but it is increasing the words or increasing the pleas or the entreaties. Yeah. How all of this falls back into our verse is something we can think about and maybe comment on next week. It may be that Rashi is just trying to help us understand this verb form, or maybe there's another subtle sermon about why this use of this verb here impacts that verse. We'll end with Stevie, and then remember next week, I'll send an email out. Next week will be our last class until Sukkot, at least that I'm teaching.
Just along those lines, I think part of the motivation here is that if you're reading this verse as Moses saying, right, down to every detail of timing and whatever, right, I can cause God to do exactly what you want, right? That's like a theologically dangerous proposition to take. And then that's compounded by the fact that this verb always appears in the causative, as though Moses is causing God to do something. So now we're gonna say, it's causative because the prayer reverberates and multiplies into more prayer, right? Not because it's some sort of Moses directing.
That's very interesting, Steve. That connects with what Barry said before. Lest we think that Moshe is claiming the power to himself, and lest you think that that is strengthened by the fact that it's a causative verb, I'm telling you it isn't. It's interesting. I'd not thought about that. Shkoyach, have a good week. See you soon.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.